This is the beginning of a new era of communication and understanding, all with full HIPAA compliance, third-party integration, enterprise-grade security, optional EU data residency, and industry-leading reliability across all agents.
In this After Effects masterclass, we'll learn how to create this animation from scratch. This style of motion graphics is widely used for explainer videos and product promotions, and more companies are looking for professionals who master these techniques. So, if you want to learn how to make animations like these and improve your motion design skills, this tutorial is for you. This animation is a recreation of one of ElevenLabs' fantastic promotional videos. Attempting to recreate animations is a great way to practice and learn about the process. Of course, it's always important to acknowledge and give proper credit to the original source. If you'd like to support the channel, in addition to your likes, you can also become a member of the Motion Graphics Zone on Patreon. There I share all the projects and materials I use in my tutorials, among other things, so you can continue practicing and improving your motion design skills. I've included the link in the description if you'd like to check it out. Many of you have asked me where I get the voices for my edits, and it's right here at ElevenLabs. First of all, if you can do the dubbing with human voices, that's much better, but if you don't have someone to dub or voice your videos, this is an incredible generative voice tool, and some of the voices sound very realistic. Here are all the plans. With this free plan, you get 10,000 credits, which is great for adding voices to your reels, shorts, or short-form videos. However, if your intention is to create a documentary-style channel or long-form explainer videos, you'll need one of these plans. I have this one because my tutorials average almost an hour in length, so I need a lot of credits. You also have the option to customize your own plan. And then there are these two here, where you can get 2 to 11 million credits, which is enough for many hours of audio. Once you register and log in, you'll see this interface. It has many options, from generating sound effects to cloning your own voice. But the main tool is generating audio from text. In the Explore option, you have tons of voices to choose from, and you can hear how they sound in various languages.
In the world of robots, imagination, just as the sail, Donovan's deep voice is the same.
अगर आपको एक ऐसी आवाज चाहिए
The courage to start is the
Ne igazodjatok e világhoz, hanem változzatok meg értelmetek megújulásával.
This Chris voice is the one I use for tutorials. A single rose can be my garden, a single friend my world. You've probably heard Brian's voice many times.
The thing always happens that you really believe in, and the belief in a thing makes it happen.
Life without love is like a tree without blossoms or fruit.
You can also search for voices based on the video's theme, for example, documentary.
In the world of robots, imagination builds dreams as
The power of kindness can light up.
Depuis l'aube de l'humanité, nous avons levé les yeux vers le ciel. Begleiten Sie uns auf eine wilde Reise durch das.
Bienvenue. Pour décrire l'un de vos projets,
Todos deberíamos estar agradecidos por
Once upon a time, in a quaint little village, nestled among
in the quiet places.
The best thing about the future is that it only comes one day at a time.
There are actually tons to choose from. Let's look for voices for corporate videos.
Let's walk through the checklist. Sign in, verify.
Hello. This voiceover is an AI replicate of professional voiceovers used in corporate explainer and training videos.
There are a few things in life that you need to understand about yourself before you're actually.
Hi, I'm Busy Bee, a trustworthy and informative British woman. Just perfect for explaining things to your audience, don't you think?
Generating the audio is very simple. Choose a voice, write your script here, click Generate Audio, and wait a few seconds. I'll leave the link in the description if you wanted to explore this audio generator tool further. Okay, let's begin. First, we're going to create a composition called Animation, 1920 by 1080, at 30 frames per second, and with a duration of 40 seconds, that's plenty. With the Ellipse tool, we're going to make a circle like this. If we press the Shift key, we'll make a perfect circle. We'll center it on the anchor point and center it there in the viewport. Here in the gradient editor, you can add whatever colors you want. I'm going to leave this one like this and this one completely white. And I'm going to move this handle to the right, more or less around here. Now, I'm going to increase the ellipse's shift value quite a bit. I'm going to set it to 2,300. And so that the blue dot isn't so visible, I have to move this slider to the right again. Okay, I like it like that. We'll rename the layer and convert it to 3D. If you don't see the cube icon, press F4 to expand it. Now we're going to move it to the left on the x-axis. We'll set it to minus 285. We duplicate the shape and move it to the right. We rename it and change its color as well. I'm going to change this one to a pink like this. Okay. And I also need to position it correctly. As I always say, I use these values and this timing because after doing some testing, they've worked best for me. Let's create a 35mm camera and a node. Again, right-click, New Null Object. We convert it to 3D, and we parent the camera to it. Here, at the beginning of the timeline, we select a keyframe for Z rotation and another for position. Pressing the U key, we select only the keyframes. Here, the rotation will be minus 35 degrees. We move forward a bit, and now we set it to 35. And we're going to place this position keyframe right there. Here at 220, I'm going to set it to 210 degrees, and I'm going to move the camera backward on the Z-axis. I'm going to activate two views to see it better. Here at 320, I'm going to set it to do a full rotation, 360 degrees. And if I move the camera backward before, now I'm going to move it forward. From here, we go to 420, and I'm going to rotate it a little more. I'm going to set it to 45 degrees here, and now I'm going to continue moving the camera forward until I make the transition through these two shapes. Now it looks a little robotic because we have to make some adjustments to the animation curve. But first, let's do a small animation to these two shapes. With these keyframes below, we select the two layers and mark a keyframe in position. At this point, I'm going to move this one a little to the left and this one to the right. We can use the safety margins if we want. We'll leave this one attached to that margin and this one to the other. But as we always do, we'll set the exact values. At this point, I'm going to move the circles toward the center so they intersect. And then we can create that black shape we saw in the example. Okay, now we'll select them all, and with F9, we'll smooth them. We're going to add a little influence to the curve. We'll start with the rotation ones. Right-click, keyframe velocity, and we'll set the influence to 70%. These two here too. And these two as well. Right-click, keyframe velocity, and here we set it to 70. We should end up with a curve like this. If it doesn't look like this, you need to have Edit Velocity Graph enabled. Now, if we look closely, every time the animation reaches any of these keyframes, it stops. That's because the entry and exit velocity is 0, which means it moves at 0 pixels per second, or that the animation is completely stopped. So let's select them all, and by double-clicking, we'll activate the continuous option. Now we can move them as if they were 1. If you hold down the Alt key and scroll, we can zoom in or zoom out. Let's start with this first one. If we move it up a little, we'll quickly see the difference. Now, the animation moves very slowly through this part, but it never stops. Even so, we're going to set the exact value. We'll set this one to 50 and this other one to 45. Let's see. Well, now it's clearer. Here, for this keyframe at the null position, right here where we're going to make the transition, I'm also going to increase the entry and exit speed a little. So I'm going to lock the continuous option, and I'm going to move this one up a little. I'm going to set it to a value of 1,000 pixels per second, which, unlike the rotation parameter, here, instead of talking about pixels per second, we're talking about degrees per second. We're going to duplicate this shape using Ctrl-D and then rename it Mate. In the Fill options, we'll set it to a solid color. For now, we'll make it red so it's easier to see. Press the U key and delete all these keyframes. To make it follow the same movement as the pink shape, we need to parent it to the pick whip. Now, we'll make this one a matte alpha of the blue circle and make this layer visible again. And there we have the effect. I'm going to paint this shape black. Perfect. Let's continue. With the rounded rectangle tool, we'll make a shape like this. And in the Fill options, we'll set it to a solid color. For now, red so we can see it better. This will be called Shape Base. We center the anchor point, convert the layer to 3D, And while here at the last keyframe, we press Ctrl plus Home to center the shape in view. The thing is, it's not visible now because we have these circle layers in front. Look, here's the shape, here's the camera, and here are the circles. Let's do a very simple trick. Right-click to create an adjustment layer and place it below the shape. This allows us to separate the 3D space into two different ones. And although the layers react to the camera's movement, they do not interact with each other. Therefore, the layer on top will be visible. If you don't want this shape to rotate, you can do the following. Open the Z rotation tool and align it with the Z rotation of the null shape. Notice how both the camera and this shape are rotating to the right, giving the impression that it's not rotating. However, if you want to leave it as before, that's fine. It's a matter of personal preference. With the layer selected, go to the ellipse tool and draw a circle like this. You need to hold down the Shift key to make the circle perfect. Something like this. What I want is to draw this circle within the same layer, instead of on a different one. Now, with nothing selected, let's add a merge paths. This will combine the shapes. If we add a stroke and increase its thickness, notice that even though there's a circle and a rectangle, the stroke surrounds the entire shape as if it were a single form. That's because we've combined the paths. We'll rename this one Big Circle and delete the stroke. Now using Ctrl plus D, duplicate this circle. The copy will be called Small Circle. Make it slightly smaller and fill it with black. You can't see it now because we need to move it behind the merge path. There it is. I'm going to keep only this layer to see it better. What I want to do now is see the background through the small circle. So let's add another merge path and move it behind the small circle. What's happened now is that it's blended all the layers above it. But if we go to the options and change from add to subtract, we can now see the background through the small circle. I'm going to remove this fill property and add a gradient fill. To see the gradient handles, we need to select all the layers and group them with Ctrl G. Now the handles appear. We place one here and the other here. We go into the gradient and change its colors. I'm going to leave it as is. Now we duplicate this layer with Ctrl D, and the copy will be called Stroke. We'll keep only this one to see it better. We go to Contents and delete the gradient fill. Now we're going to add a gradient stroke. Just like before, to see the gradient handles, we have to put it in the group. Here they are. We go back into the gradient and change its colors. If you want, you can also increase its thickness. For now, I'll leave it at 4. Here I'm going to change the colors. Okay, perfect. So on one side we have the stroke and on the other the shape. If we wanted to animate, for example, the rectangle path property, we would have to do it first here and then on the stroke layer. So what we're going to do is parent all the properties we're going to animate. That's why we renamed them earlier, and now it will be very easy to find them. We select both layers, and right here, for example, big. Here we have the large circle. We expand ellipse path and do the same here. Now we parent the size to this one. If we modify this value, the stroke value also changes. Look, you can see it much better there. We select the layers again and now write small circle. We expand ellipse path. And here we parent the size. Another property we're going to animate is the size of the rectangle. So we'll write rectangle. We expand and parent the size of this rectangle, the one of the path, to the size of the base shape. Let's start with the animation now. We'll position ourselves here at 320, which will coincide with this camera movement. So, let's expand the rectangle options here and create a small animation. Under rectangle path, we'll select a keyframe and size. We'll leave this value at 340. We'll unlink this chain so we can adjust the values independently. Here, we'll set it to 0. Then at this point, we'll leave this value as is, and here we'll set it to 650. We'll move forward a bit and continue with the animation. Here, we'll set it to 370, and here that is 620. So it creates this sort of bounce when it reaches this point. Here, we'll set it to 1,250 and 340 for Y. Now, at the 7-second mark, we'll select another keyframe to maintain the position. We still need to create another movement, but we'll do that with the next camera movement. We smooth all these keyframes with F9, and we also need to set the influence of these 2 to 70% to match the camera movement. To make this bounce look a little smoother, we can also make some adjustments to the animation curve. For example, we'll double-click on the X value and also lock the continuous checkbox. Now we'll move this handle slightly upwards, more or less around here. And this one too. Double-click, lock, and move it slightly upwards. This will give us a much more organic curve. Now we're going to animate the shift of the large and small circles. So we select one keyframe on the big circle and another on the small circle. We press the U key to select only these two. We'll place these two keyframes roughly around here. Now, a little before, we'll set the scale to 0 for both of them. We move forward a bit, select these two, and hold down the position with Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V. Around here, we'll reset the scale to 0, so we copy and paste these first two keyframes. We select them all and smooth them with F9. In the graph editor, we're going to shape the curve a bit. We move this all the way to the left. These two too. And here we'll set the influence to around 10 or 12%, more or less. Okay, perfect. We're also going to do a small animation of the scale. We expand it with the S key and select a keyframe. We press U again to reveal them all. This scale animation will start right here. A few frames later, we'll set the scale to 90% and smooth these two keyframes with F9. Here's an important thing we need to do so that the path layer follows the same movement as the shape base layer. So, while here at this keyframe, we use the Pick Whip tool to parent it to this layer. Notice that the stroke is still rotating, so let's press the E key twice. And now, with Alt pressed, let's delete the Z rotation expression. We'll set the rotation to 45 degrees and that's it. Now it should be working perfectly. If you want to differentiate all these keyframes a little better, let's select, for example, the circle ones, and with a right click, we'll change their color. And the scale ones too. Okay, let's continue. Now let's do another camera movement. We'll go here to the 7-second mark and move the camera backward. We'll set this to 430. We also need to set the influence of this keyframe to 70%. We'll move to 820, and now we'll move the camera forward again to do the next cut transition here. We'll set this to 2630. We'll set the influence of this one to 80% and this other one as well. Next, here at this peak, where the animation will speed up the most, is where we'll transition to the next scene. Let's preview everything and see how it looks so far. Okay, let's move on to the next scene. I'm going to position myself here at the last keyframe, and now I'm going to import an Illustrator file I have with a padlock separated into layers. I'm going to export it as a composition. I'm going to open it, and these 3 layers, with a right click, I'm going to convert them to shapes. Now with Control C, I'm going to copy them. And here in the main animation with Control V, I'm going to paste them. I'm going to give these layers a different color. I'm going to put this one up here, and the ring layer and the slot layer, we're going to parent them to the body of the padlock. Now we have to convert them to 3D, and with this layer selected, we press Control Home to center it in view. If we have the rotation at 45 degrees here, we also have to set it to 45 here. Now you can't see the padlock because, look, here we have the camera. These layers are the padlock layers, and these in front of them are the shape layers, so it doesn't let us see what's behind it. We're going to do the same thing we did before with the adjustment layer, but this time we'll use a solid, which in this case will give us the same effect. We're going to separate the 3D space into 2 different areas, and the solid will also serve as our transition tool. We'll rename it and give it a color. We'll place this solid below the padlock layers. Since it's also black, it's not visible. So to make it easier to work with, I'll give it red for now. I'm also going to scale it down a bit. And using the proportionality grid, I'll move it down slightly, more or less around here. And the padlock ring up a little. That should work. Now we need to create some animations, and most of them need to coincide with this camera movement. So what we're going to do is place some markers to guide us. We'll mark one above this one and another above that one. And right in between the 2 layers, where the animation is fastest and where we'll make the cut transition, we'll place another marker and rename it Cut Transition. Let's continue. We'll cut all these layers right at the first keyframe, and we'll animate the opacity of the solid layer. Here, we mark a keyframe and set it to 0. Right here, where the transition will be, we set it back to 100. Smooth the keyframes and refine the curve a bit. We'll leave it like this. We'll cut the padlock layers right at the transition. It looks a little abrupt now, but later, once we've animated the padlock, we'll smooth it out. These circles, once they're no longer visible in the composition, we select them. We cut them so they don't appear in this scene. Now, with a right click, we're going to create a solid that will serve as the background. We're going to give it a white color, something like this. But here I wanted the background to be black. So I'm going to go right to these keyframes and cut this solid again. Edit, split layer. And this part that I cut out, I'm going to paint it black. Let's do a preview to see what we still need to do. Okay, we're doing well. Now with a right click, we're going to create a shape layer. And to this, we're going to add an ellipse and also a fill, the color white. Here in the size of the ellipse, we're going to put 530. Also to this circle, we're going to add the fastbox blur effect. We're going to set the radius to 100. And we're also going to add a small animation to the scale, which will start right here at this marker. So we deploy it and mark a keyframe. We're going to put this below the second marker. And without moving from here, we're going to set it to 0. We'll smooth it. Right-click, select keyframe velocity, and set the influence to 80%. So we get a curve identical to the camera movement here. Okay, we duplicate it with Control D. We're going to increase the size of this copy. We'll set it to 870. And the blur radius to 200. We'll place these 2 layers above the transition solid. And we'll also clip them at the first marker. Now we also need to animate this shape. We'll focus on just this layer to see it better. Press the U key to expand all the keyframes. Below the first marker, we'll select another one for the scale. And now for the second one, we'll lower it significantly, for example, to 50. And where it says 1,250 for the size, we'll set it to 0. We'll soften these 4 keyframes and refine the curve a bit. Let's move all the handles to the right. We'll place these 2 keyframes below the cut transition. It looks much better there. If we activate all the layers, we can already see that the transition is looking really cool, although we still have a few things to fix. Let's select the padlock's hook layer and apply the trim paths effect. We'll set the value to 0, select a keyframe, and a little further along, we'll set it to, for example, 65 so it doesn't close completely. Now we'll adjust these 2 keyframes here using the reference markers. We'll smooth them and also set their influence to 80%. I might move these keyframes 3 or 4 squares to the right. I like it better that way. If we want, we can now make the padlock black. Still on this marker, I'll use Ctrl-R to bring up the rulers. I'm going to place one on each side of this shape. It doesn't need to be perfect, just for reference. I'll also add 4 more, slightly further apart. If you right-click on the ruler, you can set the exact value, but it's not necessary. We'll leave it like this, just eyeballing it. With nothing selected, let's take the rounded rectangle tool. It's important to have the Snap to Guides option enabled, because if it's not, these shapes won't snap to the reference guides. So we need to have it enabled. Now, let's create random shapes with no fill and a fairly dark gray stroke. For now, I'll leave the thickness at 5 pixels. Another important thing is that each time we create one of these shapes, we have to select the layer so we don't create 2 on the same layer. So, with nothing selected, let's create another shape. I like this approach. Right-click and create a null object and parent all these shapes to it. Now, with all of them selected, including the null object, we'll convert them to 3D. Then, we'll select only the null object and continue here at the first marker. Now, with Ctrl plus Home, let's center the shapes in the view. We press the R key and set the angle to 45 degrees, which is the angle we've been dragging from the beginning. If we activate the guides, we can see that the shapes are in the same place where we created them, except now they're 3D layers. We can delete the null shape if we want, and I'm going to change the color of all these layers. Now we're also going to add a small animation. We'll position ourselves roughly around this point where the shape expands to the sides. We deactivate the guides, and all these layers will start right here, at this point. We expand the position and select a keyframe. Now we're going to count 30 frames forward, 10, 20, 30. Right there, we select another set. In these initial frames, what we're going to do is remove each shape from the composition so they're not visible. We select all the keyframes, smooth them, and give the curve a little shape so they start very quickly and enter the composition very slowly. So let's give the curve this shape. And to prevent them all from appearing at the same time, We can separate one layer from the other by a couple of frames or 3. You can do this manually or by holding down the Alt key and selecting Page Up. I quite like it. We can also add another animation to these shapes. I'm only going to do it with one, but the process is exactly the same for all of them. I'm going to select this one, duplicate it with Control D, and name it Stroke. I'm also going to change its color, U key, remove the keyframes, and parent this layer to its corresponding layer, which is this one down here. I'll keep only this one to see it better. We go to the stroke options and add a gradient. Now we just need to change the colors. I'm going to leave it as is. To make the gradient even smoother, we're going to select the handles and position them more or less like this. It looks perfect there. We're going to mask this stroke and animate it. To mask a shape layer, we need to have this icon activated. Because if we don't, it will create another rectangle inside, and that's not what we want. So we delete it, activate this icon, and now we can mask it. I'm going to make it something like this. I'm going to rotate it a little. Around there. We select a keyframe and mask path. And a little further on, I'm going to select the mask, and I'm going to move it diagonally like this. I'm going to set the feather to 200. And also, I'm going to add the Deep Glow plugin to this stroke layer. This is a paid plugin with which you can achieve some really cool glows. But if you don't have it installed, you can use the glow that comes by default in After Effects. Here, I'm going to lower the exposure a little, for example, to 0.20, and I'm going to set this layer to screen mode. Let's see how it looks. The animation looks really cool, although I think it should start a little earlier. Now it's just a matter of adjusting the timing. I like it quite a bit. If you want to do this animation with other shapes, the process is exactly the same. Select one, duplicate it, add a gradient to the stroke of the copy, and then you just need to animate the mask and adjust the timing. I think I'm going to darken the strokes a little more, and maybe set the thickness to 3. I like it better now. Another thing, we're going to put these shapes we just made below the solid black. Let's do a preview to see how it looks so far. Here we need to add some text, so let's write something. I'm going to left align this text and make some adjustments. We'll center the anchor point and convert the layer to 3D. Let's activate two views to see it better. This text layer needs to be in the same position as the shape. Notice where the shape is and where the text layer is. We'll use the Pick Whip tool to link it to the shape base. If we hold down the Control and Shift keys, it will automatically acquire all its position properties, but we need to scale it down a bit. Now we're going to animate it. We'll go to Second 4, and we're going to add an opacity animator and also a position animator. In position, we'll move it down slightly, set it to 200 pixels, and set the opacity to 0. We expand the range selector. We select a keyframe and set its end property to 0. At the 5-second mark, we'll set it to 100%. Sorry, it wasn't the property we need to animate. So I'm going to remove the keyframes and set this value to 100 as it was by default. It's the offset property we need to animate. So we'll set it to -100 and select a keyframe. At the 5-second mark, we'll set it to 100. And so we have this animation, which, to be honest, doesn't look very good, so we need to make some more adjustments. We'll expand here in advanced, and from square, we'll change to ramp up. To smooth the text entry a bit more, we'll set ease high to 20 and ease low to 100. Let's see. Okay, now it looks perfect, but to keep the text from going outside the shape, we need to make it a matte alpha. For now, we'll put the two layers together. And now with the pick whip from the track mat, we'll make this layer a matte alpha and make it visible again. For the exit animation, we'll do the following. With Control D, we'll duplicate the animator And we'll set these 2 keyframes to start at the 5-second mark. Instead of ramp up, we'll change to ramp down. So here we have the first animation, and here's the second. But what I want is for the text to move upwards. So where we put 200, we're now going to put minus 200. Perfect. This is where the next text comes in. With Control D, we make a copy. And we're going to remove Animator 2 from this copy. We'll keep only Animator 1. Here we're going to write something else. We center the anchor point. And again, with Control and Shift pressed, we parent it to the shape base, so it stays in that same position. We reduce its scale as it's too large. Let's see there. I think it looks perfect there. This stroke that you see in the first scene, we're also going to give it a small animation, just like we did with this shape. So we select it, and we come to the rectangle. Remember that we have to activate this icon to make a mask or a shape layer. We'll just keep it to see it better, and we're going to make a mask like this. We mark a keyframe and mask path, and a little further on, we're going to move these 2 points to the right, and we'll set the feather to 200. All that's left is to adjust the timing. We're also going to add the deep glow effect to this stroke. So we select this stroke layer, copy it with Control C, and paste it here with Control V, and set it to screen mode. This looks great, but if you want the text to come from further down, let's open the animator options here. And instead of 200, let's try, for example, 400. I like it better there, and I'm also going to set this to 400. And the exit animation to -400. Now I'm going to animate the padlock and the transition to the last scene. I'm going to position myself here, below the second marker. And on the body of the padlock, I'm going to mark a keyframe at the position. 9 or 10 frames later, I'm going to send the lock back. I'm going to set it to 4,000 on the Z-axis, and maybe I'll move it down a little bit too. Around there, more or less. At 11:05, I'm going to bring it forward a bit to create a sort of bounce. I'm going to smooth all these keyframes with F9. Now I'm going to shape the curve like this. I'm going to focus all the animation's force right here at this point, so it gives the impression that the lock is closing very forcefully. Still here at this marker, we expand the keyframes of the lock's hook. And this one, which is the one that marked the trim path's animation, we're going to put it right here below. And at this point, we're going to set the value to 100. We're going to give this curve the same shape so that it starts slowly and ends with a lot of force. Also, I'm going to do a small animation in position. Below the second marker, I'm going to mark a keyframe. And here I'm going to move the lock's hook down a little. A little further on, I'm going to move it up a tiny bit. And that way I'm going to create a sort of bounce. We smooth the keyframes and the curve as before. We're going to focus all the force here. Perfect. Look how cool it looks. I'm going to go to File now, and I'm going to bring in this file, which is the silhouette of the padlock, as footage, and OK. I'm going to put this one down here, and I'm also going to convert it to 3D. Look where we have it, because I want to put it at the same depth in Z as the padlock, which we have here in this part. If the padlock has a value of 4,000, I'm going to send this layer 4,000 pixels to the back. We also have to correct the rotation. The silhouette will be visible right at this point when the padlock closes. In addition, we're going to add a small animation. We mark a keyframe in position. And a little later, at 11 seconds, we're going to bring it to the front. We'll leave it at 3,100. We smooth the keyframes and give the curve the same shape. Using Ctrl-D, duplicate it. Remove the keyframes from the top layer and parent it to the layer below using the Pick Whip tool. We're going to apply a couple of effects to this layer. The first is called Fill. I'll focus on just this one to see it better. Set the color to white and apply the Fast Box Blur effect. Now increase this value, for example, to 30. To create this blur, we need to make this layer the alpha matte of the padlock silhouette. Use the Pick Whip tool to parent it, but we need to invert the alpha matte. So click on this icon. Perfect. This gives us this glow around the edges of the padlock. Using Ctrl-D, duplicate both layers and place them below. Expand the keyframes, and with the first one selected, choose both. It's important that both are selected and colored blue. Now, bring this silhouette slightly closer to the front. We'll leave the value at 3,700 and we'll also increase the scale a bit. We'll set it to 130. Let's see how it looks. Look at this really cool animation we have. It looks spectacular, actually. This keyhole layer will start right here when the lock closes. Right-click and create a solid called Grid. Blacken color and place it below the lock layers. We'll add the grid effect to this solid, and here we'll make some adjustments. We'll switch to width slider and increase this value quite a bit. I'll leave the grid thickness at 1. Now I'm going to put this layer in overlay mode. And what I want is for it to only be visible outside the lock's outline, but not inside. So using the Pick Whip track matte, we'll make this layer an alpha matte. Just like before, we have to invert the alpha matte. For now, I see that the grid layer shouldn't be visible at the beginning. So I'm going to cut it right at this point, when the lock closes. This looks great. Now let's go to the null frame, and we're going to make another movement, which is the one that will lead into the final scene. We expand the keyframes with the U key, and we position ourselves a little before this animation ends. Here at 9:15, we select a keyframe to maintain the position, and also select another for rotation. We advance to 11 seconds and move the camera backward. We set the rotation to 1,300, for example. 60 degrees. We select all these keyframes and we shape the curve a bit. We start with the position keyframes. Right-click, select keyframe velocity, and set the influence to 70%. The same goes for the rotation controls. Right-click, select keyframe velocity, and set it to 70%. In this camera movement, I'm also going to add a couple of markers. In the center, at the highest point of the animation, I'll place another one. If it doesn't line up perfectly, you can select both handles and move them slightly to the left. It's fine if instead of having the influence at 70%, it's at 72%. And without moving the head from here, I'm going to put another marker. Right-clicking, I'm going to add an adjustment layer called Blur and apply the Fast Box Blur effect. Here, I'll select one keyframe and another in this marker. In the center, I'll increase the value, for example, to 35. I'll smooth all these keyframes with F9. I'll set the influence to 70 for this one and the other one as well. I'll move these two slightly toward the center. I think I'll delete this keyframe and leave only these two. Let's create a solid called fade transition. With this marker, I'll expand the opacity, select a keyframe, and move it 5 squares to the left. Now we're going to move another 5 frames to the right. Right there, I'll select another keyframe, and in the first one, I'll set the opacity to 0. And here we move on to the final scene. Let's preview everything and organize the layers a bit. Okay, this looks spectacular. I'm going to put the null and camera layers at the very top. And all these layers that are no longer visible below this marker, I'm going to cut them out there and paint them the same color. I'm also going to cut them out here at the first keyframe of the animation, since we don't need this whole part. I'm going to cut all of these layers below the transition. And in this part, when the last scene is about to start, I'm going to cut all these layers. I'm also going to give them the same color to keep the project better organized. For the last scene, we're going to create a new composition, 1920 by 1080 at 30 frames per second. And we're going to set its duration to 10 seconds. Now, with the star tool, we're going to make a shape like this. And we're going to go into the polystar options to make some adjustments. We'll set the radius to 20 and the outer radius to 50. We'll end up with a star this small. If you want to give it the same color as me, here's the code. We need to convert this star to 3D. We center the anchor point, and we also center it in the viewport. Here in the transform options, but the transform options, not the general layer options. We'll set the anchor point to 350 so it stays here, in this area, and rotates from here from the center. We're still in the transform options. And if we select the Pan Behind tool, we'll see a small dot. We need to place this here in the center of the star. It doesn't need to be perfect, just roughly there. With Ctrl+D, we duplicate the layer, press the R key, and in Z rotation, we'll set it to 30. In total, we're going to make 12 stars, and they'll have a 30-degree difference in Z rotation from each other. Before continuing, I'm going to rename this layer. Now, with Ctrl-D, we duplicate it, press R, and here we'll set it to 60. We duplicate it again, and this time we set it to 90. There's an expression to do this much faster, but since there are only a few, it's not a big deal. Okay, so now we have them all. Now we're going to go to the first second, expand the position, and select a keyframe. At the beginning of the timeline, we're going to move all the stars backward on the Z-axis until they're no longer visible in the composition. We'll set it to -2500. We select them all, smooth them, and give the curve this shape so that it starts very fast and gradually slows down. To prevent them all from appearing at the same time, we'll add a little offset. This one, called Main Star, we'll put at the very top, and if we want, we can also change its color. We select all of these and then move them 2 squares to the right. We're going to do the same with all of them. Okay, let's continue. Now we're going to create a null, convert it to 3D, and parent all the stars to it. Here at the beginning of the timeline, we'll mark a keyframe for Z rotation. And a little further on, here at 225, we'll set it to -45 degrees. In this first one, we'll set it to 20, so that when all the stars are in position, they'll still be rotating, but very slowly. Now we'll go to 110 and expand the rotation of the main star. We'll mark a keyframe, and now at 225, we'll set it to -360, so it completes a full rotation. We'll adjust it a little more there. We'll smooth the keyframes and give the curve some shape. We'll set the influence to 70 for this one, and to 60 for this one. To make it stand out better, I'm going to change the color of this star. We'll continue here at this point. We expand the position and select a keyframe. We press the U key to expand everything. Now we'll move forward to 315, and here we'll move the star to the left on the x-axis. We'll also move it slightly upwards. As always, we'll set the exact values. On this keyframe, we left-click, go to the keyframe interpolation, and in the option that says linear, we're going to change to Bezier. This handle will appear here. We'll move it down a little to give the curve the star's trajectory. Now we need to adjust its influence. We'll set this one to 55 and this one to 75. We advance to 405. And move the star again on the x-axis to the right. I'm going to activate the proportionality grid to use as a guide. I'll leave this star roughly here, at this grid intersection. We also need to adjust the influence of these two keyframes. We'll set this one to 75 and this one to 95. We should end up with a curve like this. Let's preview it to see how it looks. We'll also add a small animation to the scale, but not the overall scale, rather the polystar scale. We go to 120, open transform, and select a keyframe. Here at 225, we're going to set the scale to 150. And a little further on, we'll set it to 90. We'll smooth these two keyframes. And without moving from here in the Polystar's transform options, we're going to select a keyframe for rotation, still at the 2-second mark. And from this point, we'll go to 310. Here we'll set it to rotate a full circle. We'll place this keyframe below these. Now, as this star passes over the others, we're going to cut the layers. Here, at this point, we can cut. You can do this with the shortcut Control-Shift-D, or you can also go to Edit, Split Layer. We move on a little further, and at this point we cut this star, and we're going to continue doing the same with all of them. Look at the cool animation we have now. Later, when we add the echo to this star, it's going to look even better. For now, I'm going to paint it the same color as all the others. And I'm going to put this composition in its folder. Now I'm going to come back to the main composition, and this one we just created with the stars. We're going to put it up here. If we want, we can change its color too. We have to convert it to 3D. And it's going to start right here at this marker. While we're here at the last keyframe, we select the composition, and with Control plus Home, we center it and adjust the rotation as well. Although we still have a little work to do within this composition, look at the cool transition we just made. Before entering the last scene, before finishing the animation, let's polish this padlock transition because notice that it looks very dark there. And what I want is for it to appear very smoothly. So let's select these 3 layers: the body of the padlock, the slot, and the hook. Right-click and pre-compose them. This one is going to be called Padlock. We activate this box to adjust the duration. To keep it working the same as before, we need to activate the continuous rasterization icon. And we're going to apply the fast box blur effect to this composition. Here, at the beginning, we mark a keyframe. We'll set it to, for example, a blur of 5, and 10 frames later, we'll set it to 0. We're also going to add a small opacity animation. Here we'll set it to 15, for example. And below this keyframe, we'll set it to 100. Now the transition looks much smoother. Now then, we move on to the last scene and continue adding the remaining elements. In this last movement of the star, we're going to create a cut transition in which this graphic bar won't appear. We go into the graphics editor and position ourselves here at the highest point of the animation. If it doesn't match up, we can move this handle a little to the left, more or less around there. Without moving the tool head, I'm going to place a marker called Cut Transition. Right at this point, we'll cut the star layer. And now with the pen tool, we'll create a path. We'll remove the fill and give it a white stroke, for example, with a thickness of 60 pixels, which is sufficient. We'll mark a point roughly here and another one over here. And here in the options, we're going to set the ends of the path to be round. We can center the anchor point and center it in the viewport, and now move it down a little to get it perfectly aligned. We're going to cut this stroke layer here and apply the trim paths effect. We'll set the end property to 0, mark a keyframe, and now move it forward 30 or 40 squares. Here we'll set it to 100, smooth the keyframes, and give the curve this shape. You can see an empty frame here between the star and where the path appears. So we'll move this keyframe back 1 square. Perfect. I want this star to still be rotating in this part. So I'm going to put this rotation keyframe right here in the cut transition. And I'll also make it linear. It looks perfect there. Now let's create the text. I'm going to add, for example, a 9. I'll center the anchor point and center it in view. This font is called Helvetica, but you can use whichever one you like best. We're also going to cut the text layer at this point, and to create the animation, we'll add an angle controller. We expand the text panel, and with the Alt key pressed, we click on Source Text. Now we'll parent this pick whip to the controller. Here at the beginning, we select a keyframe, and right above it, we'll write another number. It's not very clear now because we need to make some adjustments. We go back into the expression, and at the end, we continue writing value dot to fixed. To display decimals inside the parentheses, we can put, for example, a 1. And that will give us a decimal point. If you want more, just write the number you want here. In this case, 1 is enough. And also, at the end of the expression, we'll add plus open and close quotation marks. And inside the quotation marks, we'll put the symbol we want to appear, for example, the percent symbol. I'm going to make this text a little smaller. And with the pan behind tool, I'm going to place the anchor point at this bottom left corner. If you hold down the control key, it will automatically stay in place. Instead of starting from 0, I might set it to, for example, 50, but we have to be on the first keyframe. I like it better that way. Now let's create the star's echo effect. With Control D, we make a copy, and we'll apply the echo effect to the bottom layer. I'm going to keep only this layer to see it better. I'll set the echo duration to 0.02 seconds and the number of echoes to 100. Here I'll change it to maximum. I'll leave the decay at, for example, 0.95. I'm also going to create a small animation of the intensity. So I'm going to select a keyframe U key and place it roughly here in this area when the star starts to descend. The value will be 0. And at 205, I'm going to set the intensity back to 100. I'm going to smooth this first keyframe with F9 and set the influence to approximately 80%. I like it better that way. With Control A, we select all the layers and activate motion blur. We do the same in the main composition. We select all the layers and activate motion blur. It's not necessary for the null layer, nor for the adjustment layer, nor for the solid layer, nor for these two layers, but it's fine if they have it activated. One last thing I forgot to mention here. We also need to add a small animation to this text on the scale. We already set the anchor point in this part, so while still here at the transition marker, we're going to mark a keyframe on the scale. We'll place this below, and without moving from here, we'll set its value to 0. We smooth the keyframes and shape the curve like this. All that's left is to add the audio, sound effects, and some good music to go with it. And our animation is finished and working perfectly. By the way, I'll also be sharing this project, including the sound design, on Patreon, so anyone who wants to can support the channel there too, so the tutorials never stop. Now then, see you in the next video.